Today I'm going to show you how to make an easy set of drawers for your garage or workshop out of a single sheet of 1/2 inch ply with no need for a table saw, router, plunge saw, Festool, domino or any of that old. So this project is made from one sheet of 12mm or 1/2 inch ply. But as is quite usual, the panel saw in my local DIY shop wasn't working. So I brought it back in one piece and I need to make all the cuts at home. The first 3 cuts are simply 100mm strips, full length. So I do these outside using a rip fence on my circular saw, just to take a little bit off the size and weight of the sheet before I take it inside. Before finding you're not actually cutting the width you think you are, I always like to make a quick test cut and measure it and just double check the width before I go too far. Using a fence like this on your circular saw gives a reasonably accurate cut if you're careful and you make sure the ply is tight up against it all of the time. With the sheet now 75% of its original size, it's a lot easier to carry and to work with inside the workshop. My next cut is a 400mm strip full length, and for this I use packers to elevate the ply off the workbench so I don't cut through it. And I use my homemade track for my circular saw, which I need to move halfway through the cut, because it's only just over 4 foot long. This particular cordless DeWalt saw is a great tool and I use it all the time, and also comes in handy to cut bits of timber in the car park of your local DIY store when they're too big to fit in the car. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Having said that, I will be investing soon in a track saw, as I've got a project coming up where I'm going to be doing lots of cutting of sheet goods, and I need it to be accurate and easy and have a dust port, which this one doesn't have. Once I've cut the sheet long ways, I continue in the opposite direction until everything is cut. So that, it's definitely getting a bit warmer now. So that's all the big cutting done, and obviously if you've got a table saw then you can do it on a table saw. A lot of people haven't, that's why I showed you how to do it with the circular saw. I've still got cutting left, but that's essentially going to be the drawers, which everything is going to be cut on the miter saw. So what I've got here is I've got 2 sides and a top and a bottom, and I've got a base for 4 shelves, and this is essentially going to slot in and out, and hold the shelf on top, which I'll make on top. Now, normally that would slot into, well, a slot, a bit like when I built my case for my organisers, where I used a router to route out a slot for the shelves. But on this project, you don't need a router. I've got a solution that anyone can build as long as you can cut a piece of ply. All of the dimensions of my cutting here on my cutting list are at the end of this video, where you can pause it and just have a look at how to cut up that full sheet of ply. And I've designed it to minimise the waste. This is one of the waste pieces. Yeah, I know. So everything, you get as much out of this sheet of ply as possible. So I think I need to move on. And the first thing I'm going to do is build this box. To fix all of these components together, I'm going to glue and screw. But to make life easier, I'll use my pin nailer first, just to hold things in place before screwing them together. You don't have to do this, but it is easier if you have a nail gun. So if you're designing anything in ply, most people don't realise ply has a stronger direction and a weaker direction. It might only be a small difference, but there is a difference. However, if you're building things of this sort of size, that are non-structural, you don't really have to worry about it. What you do have to still worry about is how you build the box and how it's going to be held up, especially if it's going to be like screwed to the wall and supported in some way. How you arrange your joints makes a big difference on the longevity, or the success, should I say, of a shelf like this. And I'll explain it a little bit later. I'll show it to you once I've finished. But the best video that I've seen on it is from Peter Millard from 10 Minute Workshop, which I'll put a link in the description below, and that will tell you all about which way you need to be jointing your ply to get the best strength. And it is quite important, to be honest with you. And talking about Peter, Peter is going to be with me at Maker Central next weekend. That's the 13th and the 14th of May at the NEC. So if you're around and if you can make it, please come down and pop in. And on the Sunday morning, I'm going to have a group of my favourite YouTubers that I'll be quizzing them and asking them all kinds of awkward questions. So if you're around on the Sunday morning, please come down and join that. And there may be a chance that you can ask your own questions as well. In the meantime, I need to get this box right. With the basic frame built, I move on to cutting and assembling the drawers out of my 100mm strips. These drawer sides sit flat onto the drawer base, which is upside down here, and I just centre using the help of a couple of offcuts and making sure that the front is lined up and flush. With the drawers made, I move on to the runners, and using ply strips and a couple of 18mm spacers, I create grooves that the drawer bases can run in on both sides. So no need for any drawer runners or hardware other than this one sheet of ply. It's easier to do all of this without the back in place. So now everything is in and works. I glue and screw the back in permanently. I've just left everything overnight to get some strength, and I must say, gluing and screwing 1/2 inch ply creates an incredibly strong box. Just want to show you this back panel. I've cut a panel and inserted it into this box. I'm not rebaited, I've just pushed it in and screwed all the way around. And that does two things. First of all, it stops the box racking because it's got now nowhere to go. But secondly, if you wanted to mount this against a wall, you'd probably drill some holes in here and fix this to the wall. That means that this is taking the whole load of these drawers. So the weight of the drawers will then transfer to the side, which then transfer to the back. So that connection between the sides and the back has to be a good one. And if I just put the back panel on the back and then screwed in like this, once you've loaded everything and put it against the wall, there'll be that tendency for these screws just to pull out. By putting the back panel inside and screwing it this way, now these screws are in shear, which is a lot stronger than actual and just pulling these screws out. So that's the best way of doing that for sure. I've just got one thing left to do, and it becomes obvious once I put a couple of drawers in, and that is something so I can open it, because at the moment I can't get my fingers in. Now there's a couple of things that you could do. You could actually just drill a round hole so you can put your finger in and pull it out. I prefer a cutout that might come down and then go back up again, so I can get 2 or 3 fingers in, which is exactly what I did on the drawer on my bench. So I think I'm going to make a bit of a template, so each one is exactly the same. Then I'm simply just going to use the jigsaw to cut that out. So really pleased with that. It's come out just as I had hoped, and I think it's looking quite smart. Obviously you can paint it and finish it however you want. I'm just going to use this in the workshop, so I'm going to leave it as is. The only thing I would change is this gap for the runner here. Rather than using that 18mm ply spacer, I think it can do with something a little bit less. When I look at these gaps, they look a little bit big. I would use something less, and it would still run fine if it was maybe sort of 15mm, and it wouldn't have such a large gap there. Obviously, as I said, all cut out of one sheet of ply. I'll put the cutting list on the screen now. There you go, you don't get long. I'm sure if you want it, you can go back, pause it and print it out. These are all my offcuts from my single sheet of ply, which are a little bit more than I wanted actually, but I could have designed it so I almost end up with 0. But the only problem is then that all the dimensions start getting a bit wacky. So rather than 100mm high drawers, you end up with 107.5, and rather than 400 wide, it ends up as 427.2 and all of that. However, saying that, it's always handy to have a little bit of ply offcuts and spacers in the workshop. Maybe if you tackled this yourself, you could redesign it to get down to 0 wastage as well. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.